Today we're going to be learning Ketubot Daf Nun Zayin. In Israel, anyway, it's the first day of school, so good luck to all children starting school, all the teachers and Anshe Chinuch, all the educators that are starting work, and also those who started learning in Midrashot or Mechinot or Yeshivot. So good luck to all of you as well. And anyone abroad who's starting, whether you started already, starting next week, I know abroad there's all different dates. In Israel, it's a little bit more standardized. Okay. With that, we're going to get started with the story. If you're talking about children, maybe children are in my head because of later on in today's daf, we're going to talk about marrying off children at a young age, and you're going to see some interesting perspective in the Gemara, which is a little bit different from what we've seen until now. A little sneak preview into later in the daf. We're going to start off with the sister of Rami bar Hama, a story about her. This is something called a ketuba d'irkasa. You might have heard of that before. It's a case where a ketuba gets lost. It's very common. Husband deals with this a lot with his working team. Couple will come on aliyah, family will come, and they need their documents, and they ask for their ketuba, and they can't find their ketuba. Or this happens in general. Could come up, somebody can't find their ketuba, and they say, "What do we do?" So this is all based on what we learned yesterday. Remember, we learned yesterday this whole debate. There was a three-way debate about can a woman stipulate that she got some of her ketuba when she didn't really, but basically giving up on part of her rights of her ketuba. Rabbi Meir said, no way, no how. Right? You need a full ketuba because otherwise the woman's going to feel like she doesn't really have her whole ketuba coming to her, in which case she's worried her husband's going to divorce her. And Rabbi Meir goes so far as to say having relations with that woman is like bilat snoot. It's like sleeping with someone you're not married to. That's the extreme opinion. Then we have Rabbi Yosi on the other extreme, who basically says she can say anything she wants. And then we have Rabbi Yehuda with the middle position. She can't say anything she wants. She can't say it orally. She can write it down. If it's written, it's valid. If it's just stipulated, that doesn't work. And we saw that was because matnel mash ketuba Torah. Okay, if you haven't listened to Gefet yet, recommended about the whole concept of matnel mash ketuba Torah, and we talked about the different stipulations. So it's already up on our site. So now comes the sister. We're going to see in a minute how this is connected, because that was a case where the woman says, I'm willing to receive less of my ketuba. This is a little bit different, although we're going to say it's basically the same issue. Achte de Rami bar Hama, the sister of Rami bar Hama, have a nesiba le Rav Avya at the very last line in Nun Vav Amud. She was married to Rav Avya. Irkas ketubata. She lost her ketuba. She couldn't find it. Atu the Kamed Rav Yosef. They came before Rav Yosef to say, what do we do? Amar lehu hachi amar Rav Yehuda Shmuel. This is what Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel. Zo divrei Rabbi Meir. That's what Rabbi Meir says. Okay, he doesn't really get into this, but what he means is Rabbi Meir is the one who's concerned for not having a ketuba. It's no different than having a ketuba of less money. Because in the end, we saw this yesterday, even Rabbi Meir holds that she's deserving of her full ketuba. Remember, it's just that we're worried about her mental state. We don't want her to think that she's in a situation where she's not going to get all of her ketuba money and that she's not protected from the husband quickly divorcing her. So same thing with a woman who doesn't have a ketuba. It's exactly the same thing. Even though legally in the court, she can always get her ketuba, because we even said a woman who never got a ketuba can go to the court, and the court, it's a t'nai beitin, a ketuba. She can always get the money, but she's worried. Right? We all want to have a document in hand, right? What if I have a problem? Because, I need a document in hand. So he says that Rav Yehuda, again, they asked Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, that's Rabbi Meir. Ava, but here comes the big but. Chachamim omrim, ma she'adam et ishto 2 ו3 shanim below ketuba. A man can live with his wife 2 or 3 years without being married. Well, I'm sorry, without having a ketuba. Meaning you can stay married, you don't need a ketuba, it's all fine. But now comes the Abaye. Okay, now, if you've ever heard of a ketuba d'irkasa, okay, I know this happens because it's happened in my house many times. Somebody calls husband, they say, can't find your ketuba. He says, you must come over right now and write a ketuba. You cannot live without a ketuba. So it's very strange because here, Rav Yosef says, it's no problem, right? Only according to Rabbi Meir, it's a problem. But it's not a problem according to the rabbis, and therefore you can live 2 or 3 years, and it presumably means you can live forever. And 2 or 3 years is just saying a long period of time. It doesn't really make a difference. So Amarle Abaye, this is why we do what we do today. And that's why it's fun to read the sugya, because it's not so super relevant. It doesn't happen all the time, but I've seen it happen a number of times. Amarle Abaye, the Hama, Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel, you quoted Rav Yehuda quoting Shmuel. But I heard that Rav Nachman quoted Shmuel in a different context, but very relevant to here. Halacha ke Rabbi Meir b'gzerotav. When Rabbi Meir makes a gzera, we hold by it. So this is the gzera of Rabbi Meir. It's not the halacha. It's a gzera. Okay, so the halacha is like Rabbi Meir b'gzerotav. When he makes what we call a takana or something, and this was a takana to protect the woman so that she doesn't feel in marriage that her husband is, not going to, might divorce her quickly or won't give her what she's deserving of. And therefore, we should hold like Rabbi Meir here. So comes Rav Yosef. Now, remember, Abaye was the student of Rav Yosef. So Abaye raises a question to his rabbi. Ihachi, if so, Rav Yosef answers him, Zil Ktovla, go write her a new ketuba. And in fact, this is why we insist on writing a ketuba right away. And it's very interesting because in the end, it's not really a halachic thing, right? It's actually really okay because the rabbis do say you could be married without a ketuba, which makes sense because, again, even if you never wrote a ketuba, it's fine. So, of course, you can, if you lost your ketuba, it shouldn't be a problem. But because of this interesting, really interesting concern of Rabbi Meir, where he's worried about what we called yesterday, lo samchadata, the woman is not going to be comfortable in the marriage. And therefore, having relations with her is like being with a prostitute. It's as if you're not married because the woman doesn't feel protected in marriage. And for that reason, we insist on you making sure you have a new ketuba right away. Otherwise, basically they say, and this is why they say it, you can't have relations together until you basically get your ketuba in order. So it all comes from here. Okay. Here comes a bit confusing part of today's daf. Okay. We're going to have one of these, sorry that I didn't get to chart it out, but one of these debates about what the debate is about. And there's even a debate about what debate we're talking about. There's a bunch of things we're going to see. Anyway, with that introduction, we'll get started. We're going to basically have a machloket between Rav Dimi and Ravin. Rav Dimi and Ravin were people who we call nechute. Nachat means linchot is to go down. So we have a debate between the two nechute are people who used to go down. It means they lived in Israel and they used to go down to Babylonia and they would bring the Torah of Israel to Babylonia. So we have these two rabbis talking about a machloket between Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan. We're both Amoraim in Israel about a different machloket. Which machloket? Well, until now we've been talking about there was a machloket between Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yosi. Okay, right? Rabbi Meir said, no giving up on any part of the ketuba. You need a full ketuba. Rabbi Yehuda said only in writing, and Rabbi Yosi said even orally. So now they're going to say so Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan are going to disagree about the debate. We don't know which debate. It's a debate of two people. We're going to go with Rashi, who says that we're talking about the debate between Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, not everybody agrees. Some people think it's the debate between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, but we're going to go with Rashi, who says that we're discussing the debate between Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Yehuda. Can you orally, can she say, I already got half the money, or is it only if it's in writing? If it's not in writing, she can't say it. So, well, let's just assume that's what this is about. So, Ki'ata Rav Dimi, where Rav Dimi came. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Levi, Mishum bar Kapara, quoted Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, quoted Rabbi Shimon ben Levi, who said it in the name of bar Kapara. Machloket b'tchila. The machloket between, again, let's just fill in according to Rashi, the machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosi, can she orally stipulate, or can she not, that she got part of the ketuba, is b'tchila, is in an earlier stage. I'm specifically not explaining what the earlier stage is because that's part of what's not clear here. But in an earlier stage, there's a machloket. Aval b'sof, but if it's at a later stage, l'divrei hakol and a mochelet. Everybody agrees that she can no longer, even Rabbi Yosi says, at a later stage, she cannot renege on part of her ketuba, only at the beginning. Rabbi Yochanan amal, bein bezo machloket. According to Rabbi Yochanan, there is no place where they all agree. Both cases, b'tchila, b'sof is a machloket. However, Amar Rabbi Avahu came and said, I heard directly from Rabbi Yochanan. He explained to me himself. De'ana, me, meaning Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, lo pagina hadade. We actually don't disagree. It's an issue of semantics. That's why I didn't define what beginning and end is. Okay. We're going to basically say there's 3 stages. There's before the chuppah. There's after the chuppah, before they have relations. So that's going to be the same, this is why it's going to get tricky. We're going to have tchilat chuppah, which is before the chuppah. That's stage 1. Then we have stage 2. Sof chuppah, tchilat bi'ah. End of chuppah, beginning of bi'ah, meaning before they have relations. And then there's sof bi'ah. Okay, there's the end of after they have relations for the first time. So it's all a question of what tchila and what sof is. My betchila, that's Rabbi Yochanan comes and says, you think we disagree? We don't disagree at all. My betchila, Rabbi Yosef and Levi, tchilat chuppah. He was talking about stage 1 when he said tchila. The beginning, before the chuppah, he said that's the machloket. Umay sof bi'ah. And when did he say everyone agrees? In a mochelet, at the very last stage. And when I said tchila v'sof, there's machloket, I meant tchilat chuppah v'sof chuppah dihi tchilat bi'ah. I meant tchila was tchilat chuppah, sof was sof chuppah, which is really tchilat bi'ah. In other words, I meant stage 1 and 2. So he said stage 1 has a machloket, stage 3 everyone agrees. I said stage 1 and stage 2 is a machloket. He didn't disagree with that because he said he didn't talk about stage 2 at all. But he obviously would think of stage 1 machloket. There's also machloket stage 2 because he said only in stage 3 do they all agree that you can't. So basically, we both agree. Okay, that's what he says. Kiyata Ravin, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Pasi, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Mishmar Kapar. We're going to have the same machloket, but everything moves over a level. Okay, and the same issue where he's going to say they have a machloket. Rabbi Avahu is going to say there is no machloket, and it's just an issue of semantics. Okay, the language they used. But it's going to be minorly different. Kiyata Ravin, so when Ravin said he brought the name of all these people, machloket levasof. The machloket is at the end. Aval b'tchila divrei hakol mochelet. This is the opposite extreme, right? Before we said the machloket at the beginning, and at the end, everyone agrees, no way, no how can she renege on any part of the, she can't forego any part of her ketuba. Here, Ravin disagrees and says, no. According to Rabbi Yosef and Levi, in the beginning, that's where everyone agrees. Everyone agrees that she can give up on part of the ketuba orally. She can forego part of her ketuba. Even Rabbi Yehuda agrees at a beginning stage. Aval b'tchila, but the machloket is levasof. Their debate is at a later stage. Rabbi Yochanan amar bein bezo machloket. Again, we don't know. We're talking about stage 1, stage 2, or stage 3, right? Clearly, we're talking about some early stage and some later stage. The question is it stage 1, stage 2, or stage 2, stage 3? We'll get to that in a minute. Rabbi Yochanan says bein bezo machloket. So again, Amar Rabbi Avahu, L'didi mefarshel minei de Rav Yosef ben Levi. L'didi mefarshel minei de Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yosef ben Levi lo pagin hadade. He said, I heard directly from Rabbi Yochanan that he told me, I and Rabbi Yosef ben Levi do not disagree. My levasof da Amar Rabbi Yosef ben Levi. Again, it's an issue of what did they mean when they said tchila and sof. Rabbi Yosef ben Levi, when he said sof, he meant sof chuppah. Again, what did he say? The machloket is levasof. That meant stage 2. Umay tchilat chuppah. And what's the beginning where he says everyone agrees? Stage 1. At stage 1, before the chuppah, everybody agrees she can change her mind. At stage 2, end of the chuppah, that's when there's a machloket. When I came along and said bein bezo machloket, what was I talking about? Tchilat bi'ah v'sof bi'ah. Stage 2 and stage 3, which means again, Rabbi Yosef ben Levi was talking about stage 1 and stage 2. Once he said everyone agrees in stage 1, but they disagree in stage 2, he also meant stage 2 and further on. They disagree from then on in. And I was talking about stage 2 and stage 3, which means that both of us were saying the exact same thing. Okay, so it would have been nice if we had ended the sugya right here. Again, a little bit confusing, but not as confusing as we're going to get in one more minute. Although, again, I think actually the last part will kind of bring it all together. So again, let me just review. Rav Dimi basically says that everyone agrees in stage 3 that no one can change their mind, and right, she can't change her mind anymore orally. And the machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosi, again, this is according to the way Rabbi Avahu explains it, is in stage 1 and stage 2, right? And according to Ravin, we have the opposite. Stage one, everyone agrees that, it's not so much the opposite. They're actually saying something similar, which is, right? So everyone agrees there's more likelihood we're going to allow her to forgo her ketuba before, when it's so early in the game. Later in the game, less likely. So he puts it more on the beginning. Everyone agrees, yes, mochelet. As time goes on, right, we're going to have a machloket. The debate is the later stages, where Rabbi Yosi still agrees that at the later stages she can be mochelet, but not at, right, but Rabbi Yehuda says no. So now comes Rav Papa and says the following statement, which is a purely theoretical statement, to which the Gemara is going to say, if it's a purely theoretical statement, why are you saying it? And we'll explain. Amar Rav Papa, ilavda amar Rabbi Avahu. If Rabbi Avahu hadn't come and said, this is why it's theoretical. If he hadn't said, L'didi mefarsha levinei Rabbi Yochanan, da'anav Rabbi Shua ben Levi lo pagina na'adade. If he hadn't said that Rabbi Yochanan told him that we don't disagree, and it's just a matter of what he calls beginning and what I call beginning, since beginning and end is all relative. Hava amina, I would have thought, or I would have said, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi pligi, they disagree. Rav Dimi and Ravin lo pligi. But Rav Dimi and Ravin don't actually disagree. Why? Because now, okay, to make things more complicated, forget about the tchilah v'sof that we were saying about Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan. Now we're going to say the tchilah and sof according to Ravin and okay, we just described, Rav Dimi says, machloket, right, in the beginning stages, but it's stage, right, meaning 1 and 2, that's beginning. Stage 3, everyone agrees, in a mochelet. And according to Ravin, everyone agrees in stage 1, she can forego. Stage 2 and 3, there's a machloket. So now he's going to come and say, no. They're not talking about 3 stages. Each is talking about 2, and they actually all agree. And we have one complete picture of, that this is what he would have said. My sof takana Ravin, when Ravin says at the end, there's a machloket, he doesn't mean at the end, stage 3. He means sof chuppah, the end of chuppah, which is stage 2, middle stage. Umay tchilat takana Rav Dimi, tchilat bi'am, where Rav Dimi says they argue, and each one says they argue in the beginning or the end. The one who says beginning means beginning of bi'ah. The one who says the end means end of chuppah, which is the same exact stage. And then we basically end up with something very simple. And that's why I said, in a sense, this maybe brings it full circle. He says, if we hadn't had Rabbi Avahu, I would have said Rav Dimi and Ravin are really saying the same thing. And it's Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shua ben Levi who disagree, because Rav Dimi is saying everyone agrees in the case. And then what do we have? We'll say it like this, very simple. Everyone agrees at the beginning, she can be mochelet. She can say, I forego my ketuba. That's before the chuppah. Everyone agrees at the end, after they've had relations, consummated the marriage fully, no change. You can't make any change at all. The machloket is in the middle. And then that means there's a machloket in the middle, right? That Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yehoshua really disagree. That's what would have worked for me better had Rabbi Yochanan not come along and said, we actually agree. To which the Gemara says, my kamash malam, why are you telling us this? What do we gain from this if it's purely theoretical and it's not true? So he says the following. This is just interesting in terms of machlokot in general. There's different kind of machlokot that we've seen in the Gemara. The basic machlokot that we normally see is 2 people disagree about a particular issue. I think it's this way, you think it's that way. That's the most common. Although very often we have a debate about what a particular person said. I think he said this, and someone says, I heard him say this, right? And there's different traditions about what people said. Now, which machloket would you prefer? You prefer to have a machloket between 2 people disagreeing about a particular topic, and then we say, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. Everybody has rights to say what they want, and they're all part of the Torah that was given to man, and right, it's the words of the living Torah. God gave us the Torah to interpret. It's great. We like machlokot for the most part. But when you have a debate about what somebody said, that one of them is definitely not right. One of them is a mistake, or he's lying, or we don't know what. But if I come forward and I say, I heard my teacher say this, and you said, I heard my teacher say that, one of us is not correct. Now, either the teacher said 2 different things at 2 different times, but then one was later than the other, and we're assuming we go by when the teacher changed their mind, or right, very apropos for first day of school, right? Misunderstanding things the teacher says, or right, I just heard one thing, you heard the other thing, and we all often know that when we listen, we all hear different things. We kind of listen to people through our what our mindset is at, what our way of thinking is. And one of them is wrong. So he says like this. What you learn from this is I'd much prefer machloket where two amoraim are disagreeing with each other than two amoraim are disagreeing about what one emorah said. So I prefer to say that Ravin and Rav Dimi are saying the same thing because they're trying to understand the machloket of Rabbi Shua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan, rather than that's already problematic. I'd rather they agree on what Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shua ben Levi said, and I'd rather say that they disagreed. In other words, who disagreed? Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shua ben Levi disagreed, and that the machloket is that they disagreed, and that Ravin and Rabbi Yochanan, Ravin and Rav Dimi both hold that they disagreed about this. They both hold that Rabbi Yochanan said this and Rabbi Yosef ben Levi said that, and the machloket was about the same thing, and that they had the machloket and not. It's a bit of a problem, which is even Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yosef ben Levi are disagreeing about what the Tanaim said. Right? They're disagreeing about the machloket between Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Yehuda. Some people try to answer that by saying, but that's already logical. It's more like, what do we think they were disagreeing about? It's a bit of a weakness here. Anyway, it's an interesting statement about what machlokot we prefer, not that we can always pick and choose. And that he really learned here that he can't pick and choose. I'd rather that machloket, but in the end, that's obviously not true. It really is true, as it really is that the two of them must have been agreeing, and Rav Dimi and Ravin were disagreeing about what they disagreed about. Okay, it was a little confusing, but if you take out the concept of it, it's also enough. Mishnah. נותנים לביטולה 12 חודש מי שטבעה הבעל לפרנס את עצמה. Or maybe I should read a little better. נותנים לביטולה 12 חודש מי שטבעה הבעל לפרנס את עצמה. That means a woman who hasn't been married before gets 12 months from the time. Now, until now, we talked about this on the first stop. If you remember, bitulani seit liyom revi'i. Right? She gets married on Wednesday. Why is this relevant? One of the reasons we said why it's relevant is because if a year passed from the time of their betrothal, he's already supposed to marry her, and the clock starts ticking from his zonah. That means he already has to pay her food, even if they don't get married. But today we're going to learn that it's not exactly from the time of Erusin. This is very interesting. Erusin, we always say, is halachic engagement, not like our engagement. And in fact, there is this thing that's more like our engagement, which we saw the other day, which is tavu'a linaseh. He proposes marriage. Often they did, we do it the opposite, but they did the betrothal. And then at a certain point, he said, okay, we're ready to go ahead with the marriage. Let's get married. Let's plan the wedding. And from that stage, the clock starts ticking, not from the betrothal. The betrothal sometimes happened like when the kids were very little. Clock doesn't start ticking from there. So the clock starts ticking from the time he says, let's get married, right? Nowadays, you might say it could be her, right? In those days, it was clearly always him. So they say from that time, if she needs 12 months to get ready, interesting, you would think in those days it was quicker to put a wedding together, right? Maybe not quicker because you can't really hire a caterer, but it's basically the food. You're not going to make that a year in advance. You don't exactly have refrigeration and all that. But apparently it took time to get the clothes together, the jewelry, all that. We give her a year. And not only do we give her a year, in other words, either one of them could say, I'm not ready yet. I need some time. Give me a year. But if you were already previously married, then you get only 30 days. And it seems also for an alman. Okay, if it's his second marriage, he also only gets 30 days. So what are the relevancies of this? It's really relevant more for her. Although it would seem the parallel might be for him too, but they focus on her. If the time comes and he doesn't marry her yet, the woman can already eat from his food. He has to sustain her. And if she's betrothed to a kohen, she can eat truma already. We're going to see at the end of the Mishnah that they changed this, but at this point, she can eat truma. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, now we have I would say, put this in parentheses, this line. Rabbi Tarfon says, Notnim laha kol truma. He can feed her exclusively from truma food, meaning a woman, part of the month she's in nida, she can't eat, she's impure. She can't eat truma when she's impure. So maybe he has to give her part chulin, part truma. But since the kohen, most of his food is truma, he's allowed to give her only truma. What does she do? She'll have to sell some of it in the shuk. She gets a lower price because she can only sell to kohanim. There's much less demand for it. Prices are generally lower, but she can basically buy her own food from that. Rabbi Akiva Omer, mechze chulin umechze truma. No, since she can't eat only truma all month long, some of the months she can't, you have to give her some chulin. Okay, half, he says, but I don't think he means literally half, but you have to give her chulin that she can eat on the days. Can't make her go to the shuk and start selling her stuff. Presumably, it would mean also if she's not willing to marry him, she might already have to start giving her all the things the woman gives to the husband, like her salary might have to start going to him, because remember we said the salary is in place of the food. Doesn't mention that here, but I would assume it goes in both directions. Hayabam, what if she was betrothed to her husband and he said, let's get married, and then he died. And now she falls to the Yabam. So how do we count the time? From the first husband, from the second, from the Yabam? So Hayabam eino ma'achil b'truma. He can't allow her to eat truma, okay? Because maybe she won't end up marrying him. Maybe she'll do chalitza. Asta shisha chodeshim b'fnei habal v'shisha chodeshim b'fnei habam. What about food though? So if she was 6 months for her husband waiting and then 6 months before the Yabam, afilu kulam b'fnei habal, chaser yom echad b'fnei Yabam. Even if she was 11 months and 29 days and then he died, and she fell to the Yabam, kulam b'fnei Yabam, chaser yom echad b'fnei habal, or the reverse. She's almost 12 months, but not a full 12 months in front of the Yabam. Eina ochela b'truma. She doesn't get truma, okay, or food. She doesn't get anything because she needs 12 months in front of him in order to get it. Or maybe she can't even get it, even after 12 months. It's not clear from here. The Rashi says here, B'gemar parachalei l'maytanya. The Gemara is going to say, why do we say this? We'll get to this in the Gemara later, not today. Now the Gemara tells us, Zo Mishnah Rishona. Back to our issue about these women who have been waiting 12 months to get married. They can already start eating truma. That's what used to be. Beit Din shel achareihem amu. But over time, the Beit Din changed this. And we're going to see two things today that got changed historically. Very interesting. This one a little less interesting than the next one. But ein ha'isha, now turning to Amud Bet, ein ha'isha ochelet b'truma ad shetikanes l'chuppah. In the end, they said the woman they changed it to say she's not going to eat truma until chuppah. Okay, so we're going to get to why this is also later. The first question of the Gemara is, we just finished the Mishnah, min nahani mili. Where do we get this 12-month period? Where in the Torah do you see a reference to this? Amar Rav Chisda Amar Krav. Rav Chisda says, the pasuk says, Vayomer achia v'ima. Where are we? We're in the story of Rivka. If you remember, the Eved, the slave of Avram, goes, the Midrash attributes it to Eliezer, goes to find a wife for Rivka, and he goes to Betuel's house. If you remember, after he decides to take her, he says, Vayomer achia v'ima, the brother who's Lavan, and the mother of Rivka say, Teshev ha'neira itanu yamim o asur. Let her stay with us days or 10. So, my yamim, what does yamim mean in this? Ilim atrei yomi, it sounds like 2 days, because yamim is plural. Usually plural, we mean 2. Mishtai inish hachi, do people speak this way? Doesn't make any sense, the line. Now, what they mean to say is that there was a conversation in between the 2 and the 10. They read it like this. Amrele trei yomi, they said, can she stay with us 2 days? Va'amr lehu lo. And the Eved answered, no. So, Amrele asara yomi, and then they said, well, maybe you'll let her stay 10. Doesn't make sense. You already asked for 2. Now you're going to say 10. It doesn't make any sense. You would never, people don't speak that way. That's what it means. Mishtai nishachi. That's not a way of speaking. You wouldn't say, can I stay 2? No. Can I have 10? Right? You would never ask for more. It doesn't make any sense. Elamai yamim shana. Yamim means a year. And then what's asur? Or 10 months. Okay. It's a year or 10 months. So then they asked for a year. He said, no, then they asked for 10 months. So what do you see here? The year is the amount of how much time generally is given. And that's why they asked for it. Again, this isn't a Torah law that we learned from Lavan and his mother, but you could say it's called a remez, like an allusion in the Torah to this concept. How do we know Yamim could be a year? Where we get this from? Because it says in the Torah, Dechtiv Yamim tiye gulato. This is at the end of Sefer Vayikra when it talks about all this land. You sell land, which type of land, how long you have to redeem it. It says, Ad tom shnat mimkaro. You have, if it's in a walled city, you have up to a year to redeem it, to buy it back. Let's say you were desperate for money, you sold your land, you could buy it back within a year. And then it says, Yamim tiye gulato. Yamim is a year there, right? The amount of time you have to redeem it is a year. So there you have yamim could be a year. So therefore here a yamim must be a year. Ve'ema chodesh, why don't you say a month? And then you could say it was a month or 10 days. Why would you get yamim as a month? Well, dichtiv ad chodesh yamim. This is what the Slav, when the Jews complained in the desert, and then God says, ad chodesh yamim ad asher yetzeh me'apchem. Sorry, Moshe tells them, you're going to have it up till chodesh yamim. Here you see yamim goes with chodesh, a month, up to a month of days. So what's the answer? Why is it not going to be learned from chodesh yamim that it was a month? Amre danim yamim stam ve'en danim yamim stam yamim shneimar b'hem chodesh. This is very common. When you want to learn a word, we've seen this a bunch of times, a word from another word, you're going to take it when it's more similar in form. Yamim, yamim. As opposed to chodesh yamim, you're not going to learn yamim where it comes by itself when it comes with a word that just defines it, which is chodesh yamim. So you're not going to learn it from there. You're going to learn it more from a place where it just says yamim by itself. I'm Rabbi Zera. Now we get to the more interesting, I think, the very fascinating part of our daf, especially in light of something that's been bothering us all along, about the father betrothing a young girl, and he can decide, she gets married at this super young age. It seems very strange. So here the Braita says, ketana, and what they mean is a ketana who's already betrothed from a young age, because she's a minor still. Ben hi uben avia yichola la'akev. She or her father can prevent the marriage from happening now. They can say, we're not ready. Okay, forget the 12 months. She has more time than 12 months. She can say, I'm too young, right? She's not interested in having a husband right now who's going to demand from her to have sex, if, or not demand, but, want to. She's not ready for that. Or, she's also, there's all we're going to get to. There's all these household responsibilities she's supposed to do. She's not ready for that. She's, 10 years old. Like we know, that's crazy. So she's allowed to basically say, not ready. Her father can also say, I don't think she's ready. To which the Gemara says, okay, that's the Braita. I get that she can prevent it. That makes sense. No, it's her. Ela avia, right, which is also just interesting that the Gemara says this, because all along we taught it as, well, the father can betroth her, almost like she's not really a part of things. Here they're saying it's so much more obvious that she could say, I'm not interested, right? This is her going into the marriage. He can betroth her, but she has to be ready to get married. Ela avia, but her father, what would have to be if the father does and not her? Have to be a situation where she wants to get married and the father can prevent her from getting married right now, right? Not from getting married to this guy. He's already betrothed her to the guy, but he can say, wait a few months till you get married. If she's comfortable with getting married at the age of 10, avia mai nafka le'mina, what's the difference to her father, right? Almost like, he'd be happy. She's someone else, someone else can take care of her. To which they say, this is a great line for parents, Sava hashtalo yada. She doesn't really understand. She's young, right? How many times do parents say, if you're a parent, you understand this. If you're a kid, you understand this, right? From the kid's perspective, oh, you don't really understand. I have a lot more experience than you, and you think you know what's good for you, but you don't really know what's good for you. Lemachar, what's the concern? Dilma mimarda v'naf kava'atya v'naf le'ilavei. What might happen? She'll go into this marriage thinking she's totally ready for this, and she'll realize that this is more than I bargained for. I'm not really ready for this. And, I got a husband now that I have to take care of. I'm only 10 years old. Like, what am I doing in this relationship? She'll end up, leaving the marriage and come back to his responsibility. Okay. So it's in his best interest to make sure that she gets married at the right time. Number one, as a father, in terms of protecting his daughter from a bad situation and getting into something that will possibly harm her or be unpleasant for her. And also then in the end, she'll be his responsibility. She'll already have been married. Now he also has to do a new heskim, a financial commitment. And it's a big balagan for him also. But it's a combination, I think, of worrying about him and also worrying about her well-being. So that's the first interesting thing. So we see that all of a sudden, she becomes a player here. She can say, I'm not ready to get married, I'm too young. And also the father can say, you're not ready. So again, the betrothal might have already happened or did already happen. But if he says, let's get married, and normally the clock starts ticking, and she agrees, by the way, she has to agree. And the clock starts ticking for 12 months, but she could say, you know what, as it gets closer, I'm not really ready yet, I'm too young. That's if she's a minor. I'm a Rabbi Abba bar Levi. And here I think is the more fascinating line. You can't make an arrangement about a ketana, meaning like go on with the kiddushin, make all the financial, the nedunya, and talk about all the dowry and all that, in order to marry her when she's a minor. Basically, he comes and says this fascinating line, and we paskin this way, that you can't have her married when she's a minor. We don't do that because she's too young to get married. It's like taking what we said a minute ago, but farther, and saying not only can she say, I'm not ready yet, but a father shouldn't make an arrangement for his daughter that he should be marrying her off when she's a minor. But you can make an arrangement when she's a minor for her to get married when she's already of age. Okay, now again, for us, we don't think 12 and 6 months is, a bogeret is already of age, or 12 even maybe a na'ara is what they're talking about. But again, imagine, right? It's like saying maybe, I don't know where you put the cutoff today. Some people might say 18, some people might say 25, whatever, wherever you hold on this. But remember that in those days, everything was much earlier. So just imagine it, right? What they're basically saying is there's some stage where she's too young and there's some stage where it's more appropriate. Okay, whether we might disagree about where that cutoff is, but there is this interesting idea of a cutoff. Before that, it's really she's too young to get married. To which the Gemara says, Pshita, obviously, why wouldn't you be able to make an arrangement when she's young for her to get married when she's older? In other words, why would you even need to tell us this? It's quite obvious that you can make an arrangement now for when she's older, as long as you're not making it for her to get married when she's a minor, it should be allowed. To which the Gemara suggests an interesting suggestion, which they reject in the end. They say, well, you might have thought, Ma'u detema, lichush dilma, and again, we talk about Rabbi Meir and how he was worried about how the woman was going to feel in this marriage where she didn't have a proper ketuba, wasn't protected. This is also thinking about how she might feel. Ma'u detema, lichush dilma ma'ayla pachta mehashta v'chalsha. Kamashman. You might have thought that if you make an arrangement for this girl when she's 8 years old, she knows she's supposed to be married to this guy. Even though she knows it's happening when she's 12, she might get a little panicked about it, right? She might get a little nervous and get weaker, right? It can trauma, it could cause all sorts of psychological issues down the road. So you might have thought maybe you shouldn't even make the arrangements when she's young. To which the Gemara says, Kamash Malan, that's why Rabbi Abba, Bar Levi said you could do it either because, which I don't think is the option, we don't care. Okay, which I don't think is what they're saying. I think they're saying is it's unlikely that it's going to cause her this nervous tension, right? You and I might say, for sure, this would cause me nervous tension when I was 8 years old if my father committed me to marry someone, but I'm living in a different world than they lived in. For them, it was protection. It was good for them to know that they had a future and they had to, right? Think about, people who, and, all of us at some point either we're in the stage or will be in the stage of, where you're waiting to get married and, you don't know, like, who am I going to marry? There's a certain, again, not in our world, but you can imagine in that world to know that you're set, right? You don't have to worry, who am I going to marry? So I think what he's saying is we're not worried about that. We're not worried that it's going to bother her. It actually might even help her, but it certainly won't cause her any stress. Or not enough for us to say you shouldn't do that. Okay, what I want to say before we move on is something very interesting about this. So let's just go historically. Historically, the father used to be able to betroth the daughter. He still can betroth the daughter, but even marry her off when she's a minor. But came Rabbi Abba ben Levi, and this was accepted, la halacha, that we don't do this. Okay, we don't allow these girls to get married young because it's, right, in a way of saying it's not appropriate. They're not ready for marriage at that point. What's really interesting is that the Rama, okay, I'll try to pull it up. I'll see if I can get to this quickly. The Rama says, so yeah, I put it here, make it easily accessible. Okay. The Rama says in Even HaEzer, if you want to look it up, it's very interesting. Siman Lamed Zayin, okay, it's in the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Lamed Zayin, Seif Chet. He says, Mitzvah Shelo Yikadesh. So the Shulchan Aruch paskins, like the Rambam, like the Gemara, like Rabbi Abba Bar Levi, Mitzvah Shelo Yikadesh Bito Kshik Tana Ad Shtagil V'Tomar B'Ploni Ani Rotze. Even takes it further. He shouldn't even betroth her to a man until she gets older and says, I'm interested in this person. Okay, they take it much farther, like what you and I would want to say. Okay, right? Let her be willing to get into this marriage. However, the Rama, who's the Ashkenazi commentator, and you would have expected theoretically, and if you think about, the Sephardim were living in Muslim countries, and they would have been maybe more into the arranged marriage type thing. But no, it's the Ashkenazi psak that says, there are some who say, there is a minhag nowadays. In other words, it reverted back to the earlier minhag because again, these are all customs. So to betroth their daughters when they're young, mishum sha'anu begalut, he uses the exile answer. Ve'ein lanu tamid sipuk kedei tzorchei nedunya. Okay, financially, it's harder for us in exile. Okay, one might claim nowadays that it's not true, right? That nowadays it's often better, right? Financially better in some places outside of Israel. But he says because it's hard to do this, right? It's harder. Gam anu mitei ma'at. We're not a lot of people. Ve'ein motzim tamid zivug hagun, and they don't always find the right shidduch. So therefore, there's a minhag. He says yesh omrim. Some people say, right, that we can revert back. Okay, very, very fascinating. I see there's a question about miyun. I want to be very clear about miyun in case it's not clear. Miyun is not this case. Okay, miyun is not this case. Miyun is when the father is not around. The father can betroth the daughter, and that has validity. No matter what, she can't do miyun from that kind of betrothal. It's only when he's not around or not available to do it, and the mother and the brother do it. Okay, that's a different, then it only has a validity on a rabbinic level because they can only do it on a rabbinic level. That's why miyun is an option. Okay, let's move on. So I want to get through the daf. Amar Rav Huna, bagra yom echad v'nitkadsha, notnim la 30 yom ka'almana. Now we're going to talk about, until now we were talking about someone who was a minor. What if she's betrothed? Let's say first she was a bogeret, so she was past the age of 12 plus 2 simanim plus 6 months, the na'arut stage. She becomes a bogeret one day, then nitkadsha, she's betrothed. Notnim la 30 yom ka'almana, since she's already older, more ready to get married, she doesn't need the whole year, 30 days is enough. The assumption is that she must have been preparing before she became a bogeret, knowing that she was getting ready to get married because she was of the age. Again, hard for us to understand at that age, but yes. So now we're going to bring 3 questions against Rav Huna. 2 are going to be answered, the third one not. Meitive, baga harei ketuba. When she's a bogeret, she's like someone who tavu alina say, who they said, let's go get married. So now, my love ketuba de betula, is this not meaning she's like the tevuah de betula, which means she gets 12 months? No, that's really not a question against him. You could say ketuba de almana, like someone who, right, the widow, the ketuba of an almana, a widow, 30 days. Tashma, second source. Bogeret sheshata 12 chodesh. Rabbi Eliezer omer ho'il v'chayav ba'ala b'mizonot yafel. If she waited 12 months, Rabbi Eliezer says already from the time of begrut, she was betrothed, she waits the 12 months, or he said, let's get married, he proposes marriage, she waits the 12 months. Rabbi Eliezer says, since he's already obligated to give her mizonot, he can nullify her vows, meaning, right, those are rights he has, right? Certain things he has to give her, certain things he gets, he can nullify her vows. So they say, there you see, bogeret plus 12 months, not plus 30 days. Ema bogeret v'sheshat 12 chodesh. Maybe it means a woman who's already a bogeret, or a woman who waited 12 months. It's 2 different cases. And then Rabbi Eliezer says, Tashma, third source, which is actually going to knock out Rav Huna. Either one of them can say, I'm not ready yet. She gets 12 months from the day they decide to get married. This is what we saw before, but not from the time of the betrothal, only from the time of the tvi'ah. Ubagra, and then she became a bogeret, harei ketuba. And that's if she was a bogeret, harei ketuba. She's like, shatvi'ah, we just said, 12 months. So, ketzad. Now they explain what this means. Bagra harei ketuba. Bagra yom echavin nitkadsha. She came of age one day and then was betrothed. Notnim la 12 chodesh ularusa 30 yom. They give her 12 months. The arusa gets 30 days. So here you see she gets 12 months. So you can't argue with that. Tiyufta de Rav Huna, tiyufta. So that's a tiyufta. The one thing we have left is that last word. What's la arusa 30 yom? My la arusa 30 yom. Rav Papa hachi kama. Bogeret shavru aleh 12 chodesh bebagrut v'nitkadsha notnim la 30 yom kamana. But he says it's stages. The first year of bagrut, she gets 12 months. But if she's already passed, she's already, let's say, around 13 and a half, already at that stage, she must have been preparing for marriage during the year of her bagrut, in which case, at that point, she only gets 30 days. Okay. Last part for today, and this is something we've learned already before. He already starts giving her mazona, and she can eat truma. So Amar Ula, Dvar Torah, Arusa bat Yisrael uchel betruma, shene'emar, v'kohen ki yikna nefesh, kinyan kaspo, v'ainami kinyan kaspo. The kohen gets to give anyone who's part of his household, so choir member of his household, which includes the woman when she's betrothed, because he does a kinyan, basically, an acquiring of the woman. And we'll get to all that when we get to Kiddushin, what that means. But basically, she's part of his household, even though she's not living there yet. She, by Torah law, from the moment of betrothal, should already be eating truma. But if you remember, there's two reasons why not. Two different, right? A machloket, why not? Why does she not eat truma when she's a betrothed woman? Maybe they'll pour her a cup of wine in her father's house from truma, and she'll give her brothers and sisters. And as if she's eating truma and she's sitting eating in her family's house, doesn't make any sense. So then wait a minute. If the 12 months pass, she can already eat truma, shouldn't be able to do that either. She's still living in her father's house if he didn't marry her. There he already designated a space for her in his house, and that's why she theoretically can already move into his house, and that's why she can eat truma. He asked a very interesting question. What about a hired person who's a kohen, who's working in your field, and you're a Yisrael? Maybe you shouldn't eat truma either. Maybe you'll end up eating with the owner and share his food with the owner. To which they say, no. Maybe you can't bring truma food to the job, because maybe someone nearby will eat it. No. Usually when you're working in someone's field, they let you eat their stuff. You would never, if you have workers in your house, you wouldn't start eating their food. So therefore, there's no concern in that case. Okay. Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yehuda amar mishum simpon. He says we're worried that maybe he'll find a mum, and then he won't want to marry her, and that's an issue. So they say, no, the assumption is, when's he going to find it? When they're in bed the first night, and he sees something on her body that's horrifying, and he doesn't want to marry her. We don't know exactly what this mum is. It's a little bit hard to understand. Well, then it sounds like the first night before, maybe she can't eat truma, and nobody says that before they have relations. So there's this assumption that his relatives do a check on her. It's a crazy thing to think about. Maybe they didn't really do this, and this is just an answer to the question, right? Because we're stuck. Sometimes we answer answers that aren't really accurate. But it seems that there was this process that the relatives would go check to make sure, and he would know before he got married. Obviously, you have to ask, why didn't they do it then before the betrothal? And then she could already eat truma. It's a good question. Well, then an Eved who got bought by Israel, by a kohen, maybe he shouldn't eat truma till he checks to make sure he doesn't have a mum. To which they say, there's no such thing. Why? If it's on the outside, before he bought him, he would have seen it. It's on his face, let's say. If it's under his clothes and you can't see it, we don't care what's underneath his body. He's working for you. It's not like you're married to him. He's working for you, and therefore there's no concern. We're going to get a little bit more into this issue of an Eved and other possible things you might find, and why we don't say, oh, the whole idea here is if she had some blemish, you could say, you didn't tell me about this, and therefore I'm divorcing you and I don't have to give you anything. And that's why if she eats the truma, well, retroactively, it'll turn out she shouldn't have actually eaten the truma. Okay, long daf again. We'll finish here. Have a great day, everyone.